Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today, as you already noticed, we are going to take a stab at the brand new Volkswagen iD.5, and not just any iD.5 but the top of the range model, the GTX. For starters, let's try and figure out what exactly the iD.5 is, and then we'll hop on to the GTX part. So the Volkswagen iD.5 is basically the coupe version of the iD.4 I tested previously here on my channel. This, as you might have noticed, is a trend in the automotive industry right now, and the coupe SUVs have been a thing for a while now. Even though I wouldn't really define the iD.5 or the iD.4 as proper SUVs, that's what Volkswagen claims they are, so that's what we'll call them. So this is the coupe version of the car. It's basically the same car as the iD.4, as the Audi e-tron, the Audi Q4 e-tron, the Q4 Sportback to be more precise, is exactly the same as the iD.5, and of course the ENIAC also shares its platform and underpinnings with these cars as well. They are all built on the MEB platform. So the iD.5 is nothing more than a coupe version of the iD.4. Basically, the cars are identical up to this pillar in terms of design, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time dissecting what this car looks like. I mean, it's very simple up front. Everything has been optimized to make it as aerodynamic as possible. We have the already trademark IQ light headlamps over here that we've been getting used to ever since the ID.3 came out. So nothing spectacular here. The only difference is the fact that on this car, because this is a GTX, we have this badge over here, but that's about it. On this tester, we have 21-inch wheels. The ID.5, even in GTX shape, comes with 20-inch wheels as standard, so we have an optional extra over here, and we have these flush door handles on the sides of the car to make it as aerodynamic as possible. And as I was saying, making coupe SUVs in the case of electric cars actually works in favor of them, because most of the time coupe shapes are more aerodynamic than regular SUVs. So case in point, the ID.5. The ID.5 has a drag coefficient of 0.26, whereas the ID.4 has a drag coefficient of 0.28. In the case of the GTX, that drag coefficient goes up to 0.27 because it has some small differences in this regard to make it more aggressive, to make its design stand out a bit. Now, the main differences in this regard are focused on the rear end. You see this sloping roofline, and you're gonna think, well, this car is going to have a smaller boot than the ID.4, right? Wrong. Somehow the guys from Volkswagen managed to create a bigger boot on this car, even though the roofline is sloping towards the back. However, the headroom in the back is smaller in the ID.5, as I'm about to show you when I get in. Another thing I want to point out is the rear end of the car. It looks really good, and I love these tail lamps. They do a little dance whenever you lock and unlock the car, and they look really good. And since we have a GTX car model over here, we also have the GTX logo on the tailgate. That said, let's hop in the car and see what changes happened in there. And spoiler alert, not a lot has changed. As you might expect, the differences compared to the ID.4 inside the ID.5 are minimal, and that's why I decided to shoot this entire interior review from the back seat. And that's because not a lot has changed. As a matter of fact, I'm being quite generous when I say that, because nothing has changed in the front end of the interior. So we have the same seats, we have the same infotainment system, the same materials, everything is exactly the same. If we're talking about the GTX model, the only difference is that we have the GTX logo on the bottom of the steering wheel. But other than that, nothing has changed up front. The materials are exactly the same, and that means you have some rough plastic on the lower half of the interior and a lot of glossy black, which will attract a lot of dust and fingerprints. So that's something you might want to keep in mind. Our car also has a combination of blue leather on the dashboard and on the door panels with red stitching, which gives it a bit of color to keep it away from this mundane gray and the black shades. But the biggest difference, of course, is in the back, and this is where everything changes. Everything. Well, some of it changes because we have 12 millimeters less headroom, as I already mentioned. So how does a 6 feet tall person sit in the back? Well, the driver's seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position. As a matter of fact, it's a bit further back because the car has a comfort entry feature, which means whenever you're not sitting in the driver's seat, it will pull back for a few centimeters to allow you to get in and out a lot easier. So right now this seat is a bit further back than it should be when I am behind the wheel, and I still have like a lot of knee room. But in terms of headroom, I do touch the headliner a bit. We do have a panoramic sunroof over here, which really doesn't help out in that regard, but that's about it. As a matter of fact, there is plenty of room, so I don't think anyone will be very, I don't know, confused, or anyone would really mind the lack of space. So if you like the iD.5 and the way it looks outside, I don't think the fact that you lose 12 millimeters of headroom in the back will be an issue. Now let's get behind the wheel and talk about the specs and how this car drives. Now that we got behind the wheel of the new iD.5 GTX, let's talk about the specs for a bit. So the iD.5 is offered in 3 different versions. You have the iD.5 Pro, you have the iD.5 Pro Performance, and you have the GTX. The Pro and the Pro Performance are both rear-wheel drive. They only have one electric motor on board, and they are both offered with a 77 kilowatt hour battery. As a matter of fact, all cars are offered with a 77 kilowatt hour battery, and that is the usable capacity. The total capacity of the battery is 82, but you can only use 77. That said, the GTX is the most powerful version you can buy in the iD.5 range, and it is also the only one with all-wheel drive. So this car has 299 horsepower and 460 Newton meters of torque at its disposal at most. But what you should know is that most of the time, in order to save energy, the car will be using the rear engine, the rear motor alone. All done in order to make it as efficient as possible, so that shouldn't really be a surprise. I told you about that in my Q4 review because they work exactly the same. Therefore, the front end will only kick in whenever necessary or when you're in sport mode. The MEB platform used is shared with the Q4, with the ENIAC, and so many other cars Volkswagen just wants to throw out there. There's the Skoda ENIAC, the Seat Born, and so on. In terms of ride quality, I think this car is almost on par with the ENIAC, which I felt was the most comfortable MEB platform model I've ever driven. It does have the adaptive suspension on, and that really helps out, but the 21-inch wheels really don't. So they do take away some of the comfort, especially over smaller rapid-fire bumps, if you will. So over smaller ridges, you will feel the chassis a bit unbalanced. And that's normal because, after all, this car does weigh 2.2 tons. You wouldn't really feel the weight unless you really push it. But once you do, you will feel the car pushing you outside of the corner when you're driving it hard. What's very interesting is that the engineers, by using this setup with one electric motor for each axle, basically reduced the understeer phenomenon to 0. So during my time with the car, I just didn't feel any kind of understeer whatsoever, which is very interesting. Furthermore, the steering on this car, I don't know if it's different on the GTX because I haven't driven the normal iD.5, but the steering on this car feels a bit heavy and artificial. If you put it in sport mode, that feeling just gets worse. So it's quite interesting how it works overall. It's a pretty decent car in terms of acceleration. It will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 6.3 seconds, which is hot hatch territory, but it's not going to be neck breaking in any way. Now, another thing I should mention is the fact that Volkswagen says that this car should do about 500 kilometers in between charges, which is quite an optimistic view. Now, I did my usual range test with this car, and the results I got were around 300 to 350 kilometers with a full charge, maybe getting close to 400 kilometers, but in certain conditions. You can watch my full range test at this link here. It was published on this channel a week before this review. So what's good about this car is that it seems to have a faster top charging speed compared to the iD.5, because the iD.5 can charge at a fast charger with up to 125 kilowatts. This one can charge with up to 135 kilowatts. So there is a slight advantage to this model, but it's not decisive in any way. What's disappointing is the fact that we still don't get 22 kilowatt chargers on MMB models right now, at least not on the iD.5 and not on the iD.5. That's the best option in my book, because it's really fast at 22 kilowatts, but it's not a fast charger, so it won't put any unnecessary strain on the batteries. So basically, if you find a 135 kilowatt charger, you can replenish the car's battery up to 80% from 5% in about 30 minutes, which is pretty good. During my time with the car, I only used 50 kilowatt chargers and recharged the car from 30% to 80% in about 40 minutes, which I think is pretty good. I don't think you need anything more than that, because using fast chargers all the time will take a toll on the car's battery and its battery health. So overall, what do I think about the iD.5 and its performance? Well, it's, as I expected, the same recipe used for the iD.5. It's just that in GTX, guys, you do have a bit more power and the car drives a bit better, being virtually neutral offering a neutral performance through corners, but you will still feel this car's weight pushing you whenever you are driving in a more enthusiastic fashion. Overall, I think if you like the shape of the car, you should probably get it instead of the iD.5. But in my book, the best offer in this segment right now is the Skoda Enyaq. It's the most practical car, it's the most comfortable car, and in my book, it's the best looking one. So that said, this has been my review with the Volkswagen iD.5. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe to keep this channel alive. If you have any additional questions about it, don't be shy to drop them in the comment section below. Until next time, ciao.